Look on the bright side, suicide, lost eyesight, I'm on your side. Angel left wing, right wing, broken wing. Lack of iron and or sleeping. Protector of the kennel. Ectoplasm, ectoskeletal. Obituary, birthday, your Santa still here in my place of recovery. This week we're covering Nirvana's final release, Utero. Really, it's their final release.
Welcome to the Essential Albums podcast, where three guys from 85 have a conversation about some of the biggest albums ever and forgotten favorites from yesteryear. We'll dig into an album's place in culture, discuss its merits, and decide if a record holds up and is worth your time. Of course, we get into a lot more than that, so join longtime friends Ryan, Denise, and Gordon as we dive into our favorite albums and relive some of the classics. We're not talking about Nevermind. We're talking about their third studio album, in Utero, this week.
That's right. It's too many podcasts about Nevermind.
Too many.
Yeah, right.
So why are we being contrarian and talking about In Utero?
I wanted to talk about In Utero because everyone talks about Nevermind, and even just growing up, I remember just when I was getting into rock music was around his suicide and all that was going on in music. So for me, it was more In Utero. I kind of grew to love In Utero more, just because I listened to it probably more at the time. It was sort of what was around at the time. Nevermind is great too. It is a classic, but I don't know. I kind of gravitated more towards In Utero, especially when getting older and my taste developing more. It was more in line with what was going on in Utero as opposed to Nevermind. Not that it's like that drastically of a difference, but I don't know. That's it for me. I don't know for you guys. I'm sure we'll get into it. What album?
Yeah.
you prefer or whatever, but yeah, I don't know how do you guys feel about In Utero? When did you guys first hear it? Or
I guess I'll answer. I don't know. I think for me, I was young when this stuff happened. So I didn't really start getting into music until like the mid '90s. So I remember hearing the music through like older siblings and stuff like that. So like those two albums are pretty much all of Nirvana's catalog. I got into it later on. So that's kind of when I was more into music. Like, of course, you always hear the songs on the radio, and all the songs are classics. So it's hard not to know what a Nirvana song is or sounds like. But I got into it a little bit later on. So my appreciation was different. I was never really I was a little removed from it. I was never in the moment. So that's why I've kind of appreciated this one more, just because of the rock that I would go on to like later on, and indie rock music. And even this week, I was debating back and forth. I'm like, should I like factor in like the cultural impact, like for my music ranking or the album rankings and stuff like that. And this album's just, to me, it's like a classic. Like it's really good.
I agree, because since it was by the time I know for me getting into them, all this stuff was already out. So I was getting into it all at the same time, not in any sort of order. It was just sort of Nirvana's huge. Here's Nirvana. So I was kind of, everything was taken in without the context, I guess.
Yeah.
Ryan?
My first experience with Nirvana was actually a taped version of Muddy Banks of the Wishkah. So I had like a collection of a bunch of their songs, right, from different stuff. So, but I think, and then the first album I bought, actually the first CD I ever bought was Unplugged in New York. So I didn't get Nevermind for a while, but I don't remember what order I got them in. I probably got Nevermind before In Utero, but In Utero, for some reason, it just like really opened up. In Utero was more of an escape for me. Like, I remember being a teen, like stressed out about whatever, or homework or whatever the hell the stupid shit's going on. I could just get lost in this album, just put it on, and it was almost like, partially because I knew it was offensive to adults, like just the sound of it was kind of like gritty, and they wouldn't like it. Helped me like identify with it, and it gave me like a safe place to go when the judgment of the adults is like stressing you out. You escape into this album. That's what this album was for me. So it's like, it's my favorite Nirvana album. So this is why, like, when you suggested it, I was like, yeah, let's do this one.
Yeah, I agree with you, Ryan. I was sort of the same way. just listening to it, I just like a lot of my favorite songs are the ones that are just like pure energy, where you get the spastic guitars and the screaming and the noise and everything. A lot of the stuff that a lot of people don't like from this
Yeah.
album, or what you were saying, it's something like my parents would hate.
Yeah.
So for me, it was just I love that stuff. The weirder, the better. Like milk it, love it.
Yeah, and like you were saying right before we came on, it's almost as if Nevermind is not their sound. Like
Yes.
it's not as messy as they actually truly are. So on this album, you get more of a sense of who they truly are, but also their sound is developed more. Like they're trying new things out. They're more mature.
Mhm.
So you get, and of course, it's at the end of the story of Kurt Cobain. So all those elements put together, I mean, it's a really magical album.
Yeah.
Yeah. So hearing you guys talk, I think we're all kind of talking about a similar kind of thing. So I just want to ask something specific. What is your first memory of Nirvana? Because like they're like an early '90s. They're known for like kind of ending hair metal, things like that. Their sound kind of came out of nowhere for the mainstream. So what is your first memory of of Nirvana in general? I can answer first if you guys want.
If you got that, yeah, mine might go back too far. Go for
Yeah,
it.
so my first memory is, without a doubt, hearing "Smells Like Teen Spirit." I don't even know if I heard the Weird Al cover of it, or heard the actual version, but I remember hearing that guitar riff and hearing that song and being like, "This is amazing!" And that was like 6 or 7-year-old me or 8-year-old me. I don't even know, probably 7-year-old me, and I was just like, "I have to like get this is music that I want to hear. This is amazing!" And that hearing that song for the first time changed my attitude towards music. And it's my parents weren't following that kind of music, so I knew at that point that I had to listen to different music from what my parents were listening to, because back then they were listening to like, I don't know, like Randy Travis, like Dolly Parton, Kenny Rogers, like country music, like that easy listening kind of stuff. So hearing that was like, no, this is what I want to listen to, and that pretty much shifted me into the rock and roll direction.
Yeah, yeah. Smells Like Teen Spirit can't be understated. I'm sure that was the initial hook. It was like my favorite song for years. And because we came at it a little bit later, it wasn't like it was on the radio all the time, like when Nevermind, I'm sure, came out. I mean, I wasn't listening to new rock radio back then. I actually have no idea. But so when it did come on, when Nirvana came on, it was a treat. It was like, oh sweet, that's my band, because they didn't get that much played. It's almost like they got more played later, like in the 2000s, when they became classic rock.
Yeah. So my first experience with my first memory of Nirvana was, I remember kind of getting into the Much Music and music videos, like all that lane of things. It kind of lined up when I got into rock music, and I remember going to my cousin's house and he had a bunch of music videos recorded, and I believe the first video I saw and song I heard from Nirvana was Heart Shaped Box, and then it was what's it called? Sliver, sorry, Sliver.
Yeah.
Liver, yeah.
And then it was and then Smells Like Teen Spirit was introduced to me as, oh, and this is their best song. It's like it wasn't even like, oh, this is their most popular song. This is their new song. This is like their previous single, but this is their best song, and Smells Like Teen Spirit. So my introduction wasn't like I heard Smells Like Teen Spirit, heard the explosion. It kind of came, like we were saying, kind of came later. So for me, it was almost like a learned respect for it. Not that I didn't respect that song, but I didn't really understand the history of it at the time. It's sort of like the turning of the tide that it did in music. For me, It was just, oh, it's a song that's like 3-4 years old, and it's really good. Because at the time, everything on the radio sounded like it, so I didn't know any difference.
Yeah.
It sounds like you were like kind of properly introduced to Nirvana, or introduced, and like Ryan and I, or me personally, I more or less found it on a whim or luck. It was on the radio, and my parents listened to it, or maybe it was a friend or a sibling. That's how I don't even know how I initially heard that song, because
I got it through
rock radio.
No, I got it through a friend. I got it through a friend who taped that Muddy Banks of the Wishka off like a library loan CD. But like, no, it really changed Nirvana was really the first band I got into. They were really the first band where I was like, whoa, it's cool to play music. Where I had even considered thinking about playing music. Like before that, I was just like, whatever. I don't want to play music. My experience of music was music in elementary school, like choir, singing assemblies. Like I don't want to fucking do that. But seeing this band with their like guitars super low, and they're like, they're kind of their own thing. They're doing their own thing. They're screw everything else. Screw whatever's on the radio. Still nothing. Nobody else sounded like Kurt Cobain. Nobody else really covered that or was able to like. It's not like Eddie Vedder where suddenly there was a whole bunch of singers sounding the same. Nobody could do Kurt Cobain. So I don't know. Yeah, they were a special spot. And like like I said, my first CD was TV Unplugged in New York. So like, if it wasn't for Nirvana, I probably wouldn't be playing music, unless another band would have came along.
Yeah.
But
yeah, it's the same. It's like getting into rock music and just like learning all about Nirvana. You just realize like, hey, every band I'm listening to now, like it was 95, 96. It's like, but all these bands are probably around because of this one big band, Nirvana, because the song broke and kind of changed. Like there was Soundgarden and bands like that beforehand, but it wasn't until Nirvana hit where it was sort of on the radio and they were trying to find the next Nirvana, especially after he died. It's like, let's find the replacement.
Yeah. Yeah, it was really interesting because for me, I got like the Pumpkins they were on the other side of that same tape. So they came together and like my shithead friend down the street, I think I mentioned this on the Pumpkins episode. He was like, super enthused about Nirvana, and then when he's like, oh, here, check out this other band. They're kind of like more of a normal band, and that was Smashing Pumpkins. Yeah. So Nirvana's got this like weird element, like a punkier attitude, this like almost a gimmicky thing going on that appeals to a lot of younger people, like that punk attitude, fuck the man sort of thing. Whereas Pumpkins, like to a lot of people, probably sounds a little bit more classic rock.
Yeah, it's funny. It's funny you mentioned that because it was the same thing with my cousin showing me the music videos. He showed me like the Nirvana. That same day must have been like Silverchair, Green Day, Bush. I got my lesson. And
sounds like it. Yeah.
I got my lesson that day. But the same thing when it came to Pumpkins, he was kind of the opposite though. He didn't want to play me Pumpkins because he's like, oh, his voice is weird. You're probably not going to like this. I'm like, oh, okay. Like that day, just missing out on Smashing Pumpkins, which turned out to be my favorite out of the lot because he was afraid to show it to me.
Yeah, forbidden fruit.
Yeah.
And I think later on in the 90s, so like I would say like 92, maybe 93, it's probably when I first heard Smells Like Teen Spirit, probably 92. And then when I moved to a different area, I kind of developed different friends or new friends, and they had older siblings. So it was very common to hear like that grunge, post-grunge kind of rock. So it was like a slew of like Nirvana was on. They were always playing Nirvana. They were always playing Hole. They were always playing Bush, Cranberry. Like all that mid-90s rock was extremely popular then. And so much so that like I remember when Kurt Cobain, it was announced that like they found his body and all that stuff. Like I remember his older siblings. He had two older sisters. One was I think 5 years older, my buddy. And I think the other one was like 3 or 4 years older, but they were just like crying. And I was like, why are you crying? It's like, Kurt Cobain's dead. I'm like, I don't know what that means. And it's like, I was like, I was like, oh, okay. That sounds terrible.
Yeah,
like,
we just missed it. Missed it.
Yeah. And I know for me,
they were like in it, right? So it definitely had a profound impact on them.
I know it seemed like for me, it was just outside of my universe up until like 94, 95, 96 when I started probably him dying is probably what sparked it being big in the news for me to hear about it. And like, I just kind of got the echo of it. But I didn't really have any, it seemed like I was blind to it up until that time, up until he died, I guess.
No, the first time I heard about it was one of the anniversaries for sure. Not true. I'm sure I actually didn't know Nirvana existed until I like got this Muddy Banks of the Wishkut thing. So at that point I knew he was dead. Like I'm sure that was part of the story. And I mean, how much does that factor into the legend of Nirvana? Or would it have been a legend no matter what?
I guess that's something we should work our way at the end. Maybe we can talk about.
Sorry. Yeah, it's on the mind.
One of my questions is like directly to that, so we'll hold off on that for now.
We'll hold on for that.
Yeah, we'll ease into it. So I guess do you guys recall at all? I don't really have an answer to this, but do you guys recall at all when you remember hearing of In Utero first, or what was your introduction to that album, or was it kind of just part of the Nirvana blur up
The
until
cover.
Like,
I saw the cover at a CD store. I'm like, whoa, that's cool.
in,
What
like,
the hell's
90s?
going on there?
Yeah, my cousin had it first, and I remember listening to it in like his room, like he had a little boom box and just playing it on there. I remember it sounding really good and liking it, but I don't know. I was probably like 10 years old at the time, like 9, 10 years old. So
Mhm.
I
Yeah,
liked it. I liked it enough that I owned all older albums like within the next like 6 months probably.
yeah. It was grade 7 that I had this album. Like I just listened to it to death walking to and from school. So I don't know. Was that like 1998 or something? That's
Yeah.
when I got it. So yeah, but I just remember seeing the cover. It's like this sick.
Yeah, and also like back then too, like just to throw it in there. I know we kind of touched on it in some other episodes, but back then it really was like a more intimate connection because like buying those CDs, like having In Utero is one. It isn't like now where on Spotify you have endless options. It was one of like 10 or 20 CDs you owned at the time. So and
Exactly.
also it was a physical thing. So if you're gonna take it to school with your Discman, to take your Discman and a CD, that like was all you were taking, maybe 2 CDs. So you spent a lot of time with the music. So it's almost like a different relationship back then. Like when I mean like I was listening to Nirvana in like junior high or whatever, it means like from the morning till the end of the day. That's all I was listening to when I was listening to music.
Totally. There's one CD, maybe two,
Yeah.
if you want to risk breaking it in your backpack. Like
Exactly. Yeah.
I remember having a Discman with I don't know if it was Nevermind or In Utero, but I was in grade 7 and there was a girl in class and like one of the popular girls and she's listening. She comes over and she's like, "I'm listening to Aqua. What are you listening to?" And I'm like, "Oh, I'm listening to Nirvana." And she's just like, "Oh." And that was a conversation.
Yeah.
That was the conversation. That was that.
Right. Yeah, for me, I didn't purchase the CDs until like the 2000s. Like I always heard the songs and always had them, but when I think listened to the CDs from like beginning to end, I think it would have been like in high school. Like I finally pulled the trigger and got like Nevermind. I'm like, I know all these songs, but at the same time, it's like, okay, yeah, you kind of hear some not hidden gems, but the songs that aren't played on the radio all the time. So it kind of fills in the blanks there. And sorry, and then just one random sidebar question. Anise, so on Spotify, they have like the deluxe and the super deluxe. Did you take a stab at the super deluxe, like the 3 hours and 45 minutes?
No. I remember even
Of In Utero?
I
Yeah,
remember even when I bought like that box set, like when the lights go out or whatever it's called, just getting through that, especially at the time, it was like you had to switch to CDs. I'm like, oh my god, this is like a mission. And like I love Nirvana, but it's not like their music is that varied. So you're just sort of getting the like 1,000 songs that are, and there was like a lot of demos and all that. You get into that whole thing. It's cool that it's available because they have such a small discography. And when you do jump into the world of Nirvana, because I remember in high school even just getting into the deeper Nirvana songs, because when I was getting into a lot of indie rock and older like 80s and like 90s bands that I sort of missed out on, a lot of it was through Nirvana. So like you see they did like covers of like the Vaselines or the Meat Puppets, or they were big fans of the Pixies, and they were big fans of, just the different. Yeah, they had like a Devo cover. I was learning about all this older music, and then I was kind of getting into their B-sides, because their B-sides they were doing a lot of different stuff, and they were kind of a lot more noisy, which I was getting into a lot of the noise rock. So jumping deeper into their discography, if you are a fan, and I'm assuming most people are, it's just a way to get more Nirvana songs, which I'm sure no one is really opposed to. So yeah, those deluxe editions, may seem daunting, but they still have the regular editions there. So you can still listen to In Utero. If you want to take the deep dives, it's there to take the deep dive. Not like Smashing Pumpkins, where your only option is the deluxe edition.
Yeah, valid point.
Sorry, guys. I avoid Spotify like the plague. Oh, listen to my music's on Spotify. Check it out. And so is this. So is the whole podcast. But so what else is added to this deluxe edition of In Utero?
I didn't listen to it. It took me like a day, but it's basically like you get the remastered version of the album, and then I think it's 4 discs altogether, or 3 discs. But then the second disc is like the B-side, some early demos, and then I think the other 2 discs are more just like different live versions. So like one of them is Live and Loud, which I think you can just listen to that album on its own on Spotify. So it has like extra like crossover kind of stuff. So I mean, if you only want to hear like the songs once, then just listen to the album. But if you want to hear those, like Anissa sang, then take the dive.
Some of when their track listings are a little deceiving too, because some songs have like multiple names when they were in different stages of being written.
Oh yeah.
You'll see like a different song name you played, like, oh, it's just whatever, right? But
yeah. It's kind of cool that they just kept it. Just like, let's keep the old name.
Cool.
So I guess this can open us up to some song-specific questions here. So I think when I was reading this album, technically there's 3 listed, but one was canceled. So the two big singles were Heart-Shaped Box and All Apologies / Rape Me. And then the third single, which was canceled in 1994, but was eventually released in 2014, was Penny Royalty. But a lot of people probably know that from the Unplugged album as being a big single.
I remember with Penny Royalty too, when I was first getting into Nirvana, my cousin was like, this song was supposed to be a single, but it was canceled because he killed himself. Okay.
That explains it. Oh, he's dead. We can't release the song. What did you say? Slash? You said / Rape Me? All Apologies / Rape Me?
Yeah, on Wikipedia, I'm not sure if it was there like a rework, or like on the radio was it released together? Because I remember the All Apologies that had a music video, right? And then Heart-Shaped Box.
The only music video is Heart-Shaped Box.
Okay.
Rape Me and All Apologies didn't have a video. The only video was like the MTV Unplugged video.
Right. Okay.
Rape Me, I thought there was like some like SNL video that got played a lot or something, like live.
I know they couldn't play that song live, I think, and they played like the first couple lines or the first couple bars.
Or maybe that was it.
Yeah.
It was more controversial, if anything.
Nah.
Which is funny because Rape Me is one of the songs on the album that kind of most reminds me of Smells Like Teen Spirit.
Definitely. Well, I actually kind of interpreted, this is probably wrong because, even Kurt Cobain says don't look too much into my lyrics, but it kind of interpreted like, it could be interpreted as the Rape Me, like the industry raping him, because he's like kind of making fun of his own guitar riff that became like blew them up. So
pretty much.
Yeah. Could be that.
That's how I always took it. Even like as a 10-year-old kid, that's how it was kind of presented to me. Oh, it's the songs like a fuck you to the record industry or whatever.
Yeah, that's what I figured. But he also said in that interview there that it's an anti-rape song. So who knows?
I did look into that a little bit further because I always thought I had the same interpretation that you guys, where it's more just like the pressures of the industry and stuff like that. Like it's more almost like a metaphor, a superficial kind of song.
Until recently, we found out that it's not a metaphor for some celebrities.
Oh shit! Yeah, I'm not the only one.
Yeah. So funny that you say that, because it's it is. He says it's an anti-rape song, and he didn't like how people interpreted the song Polly, which is also an anti-rape song on Nevermind. So he wrote this song as more as like a reaction. So when he's singing like Rape Me, it's more like they're taking they're being defiantly, or taking control through defiant submission, and it's like they're trying to take the power back from the rapist, like the victim. It's from the victim's perspective.
Yeah,
that's why they're just like trying, like, I don't know, screaming rape me, right? Like they're not encouraging it, but trying to take that power away. And then like the whole thing of like, I'm not the only one, that's just kind of like a 90s version of Me Too.
That's Me Too, yeah, right there.
Yeah,
Nirvana started Me Too in the 90s.
Virgin right there.
So, in a way, Kurt Cobain was like woke before that. He was a huge.
He was, yeah.
Anti-homophobic. He had they played specific shows to raise money for rape victims. They were homophobic, anti-racism, all these things. So he was a big proponent of that. And he actually, I think, in the liner notes, I'm not sure if it's in Utero or on one of his albums, where he's like, I think it's Insecticide, where he's like, if you are like sexist and racist and these things, don't buy albums. We don't.
Yeah, that's the one. Yeah.
Yeah, because I remember reading that in there, and like it does make an imprint on you as a kid, because you're like, okay, if, like this guy that I'm looking up to and listen to is supporting these things and stuff, and for we may not look at it this way, but this was like the equivalent for us, like for me at least, as like a teeny bopper, like when you're like just a little kid. I was like 9, 10 years old, and this is like my role model. So it's really different to, I don't know. Nowadays, everyone seems to be sort of woke and stuff, but at the time, it's very different than some of the stuff that was going on.
For sure. And they're not like a political band, obviously, in the
No.
lyrics or anything like that. So it wasn't like part of their brand to do that. It was more like probably they had just made it huge and they had a bunch of money and power. So like, yeah, we're gonna stand up for what's right on our next album.
Yeah.
Yeah, and like I mean, I think in Montage of Heck it touches on it, but like in high school, like he hung out with like the one gay student that was there, so everybody always thought he was like a homosexual, and basically he kind of just identified with it, but he's like, I'm not gay. I'm if people think I'm gay, great, because I don't really like people. So
He's just
that's how we embrace that.
seems like he's an outsider at heart. Like he doesn't want to be hanging out with the Chads. He doesn't he that's what that music sounds like. It's like
Well, that's the whole thing with this album too. You hear it a lot in the music where he is the fame, he's the popular kid now, and it's almost like you hear him fighting against that whole notion of what is he now? Like he's kind of losing his identity. He was always this outsider, never really fit in. Now he's sort of, people are imitating him and people are looking up to him and waiting to see what he does next. And you really hear it in this album, musically, everything, because you'll have songs that are, even the way the album opens with like "Serve the Servants," which is almost like their most boring song.
Oh no, really?
Yeah. And then you go to Scentless Apprentice, which is like brings that raw energy and that like the noise rocking and stuff. And then you go to Heart Shaped Box, a little more clean cut. Then Rape Me, it's controversial, and I like the flow of this album. It's
really good.
Kind of interesting.
But the very first line of the album, what is the first line of "Serve the Servants"? Teenage angst has paid off well.
Yeah.
So he's right off the top. He's like, okay, I'm huge now. Like fuck all this shit.
Yeah, he's like it's very self-aware, and it's
One thing I wanted to note that last week I mentioned that My Bloody Valentine was like one of the first bands, or the first band that really played with this out of tune stuff, and that was true in a sense. Listening to this again, I realized that probably my first exposure to use of atonal music was this, because like listening to the solo in Milk It, it's just a bunch of random notes, and throughout his guitar solos he has out of tune notes or outside notes.
Well, yeah, like for my style of playing that I was doing when I was making music was very much influenced more of this sort of noise and like this sort of sloppiness and not really clean cut, just sort of I don't know. I've always been more attracted to that sort of stuff.
Yeah, one thing I was thinking about. I was thinking about difference between Dave Grohl's guitar playing and Kurt Cobain's, and there was one spot in a song, I don't even remember what it was, where basically Kurt's just like hanging on this dense, distorted chord with all these notes, and it just feels like a shoegaze wall of sound. Well, if that's not something Dave Grohl would do, you'd have like more of like a riff, or you wouldn't hear that sort of thing. It's just interesting, these two members in the same band.
Yeah, well, apparently he wrote the riff for Scentless Apprentice.
Yeah, that's right. And what did Kurt Cobain said? He said, yeah, it was kind of like kind of dinky or whatever, but then we worked on it a little bit more. Couldn't give him credit. Actually, I was playing that song on the drums like just a couple hours ago. It was kicking my ass. There's a flam right in the middle of the beat, so you need two hands to hit the snare drum. But it's like right in between two eighth notes on the hi-hat. It was just like, I was just struggling the whole song just to play the beat and make it smooth. And I looked behind me out the window. There's some neighbors watching. I was so embarrassed. I was like, shit, I should play an easier song.
That's funny. Yeah, and I guess how much does the production factor in? Because I mean, the album does kind of sound. It does sound noisy. It does sound like even I would say comparing it even to Nevermind, like the vocals are always nice and clean, like clean in a Kurt Cobain kind of way, but they're clear. They're not getting mixed in lower. They don't have a lower mix, but there's at least 2 songs on here where it seems like his vocals are kind of buried, or they almost not cut out, but like they're just buried in the music.
Or they'll like distort when he screams, and there's
So is that the production choice, or is that?
I love the production on this album. I love Steve Albini's production overall. Like even if I know nowadays he kind of sort of produces anything, but just that his like 80s and 90s stuff I kind of got into in high school when I was diving deep into Nirvana and their influences. I was sort of getting into like Steve Albini's music too at the time. And a lot of his stuff and a lot of his produced stuff I was getting into as well, like Jesus Lizard, because it has a very similar sound, like the bass and drum tones are very similar. And I don't know, I like it, and it fits Nirvana's music really well, especially for the way they're the 3 guys set up and the way they play and the way their songs function, especially on this album. It gives it a very heavy sound, even for songs like Rape Me and songs like All Apologies, where they're kind of slower songs. They still have that like heaviness to the guitar tones.
It's the drums too. A lot of the drum sound.
Well.
So did he also do Razorblade Suitcase? Steve Albini?
I believe so.
Because I always associate these 2 drum sounds for this, because I had those 2 albums, played them a lot.
Yeah, he did Razorblade Suitcase as well, and I remember being like a big thing. It's like, oh, they used Nirvana's producer.
Yeah, right.
They were one of those bands that were meant to be a Nirvana replacement. It was Bush.
Yeah, it's funny because they did Razorblade Suitcase. That's what Albini did. But I remember at the beginning of this episode, Ryan, you were like, nobody could like imitate Kurt Cobain's voice, and I was like, I don't know, Gavin Rossdale might have something to say about that.
Okay, no, he does he occasionally do the Eddie Vedder thing?
I don't. Well,
I think he does.
In terms of the authenticity of what Kurt Cobain's voice brings, I don't know if it's like the drug use or how much he didn't care about certain things or cared. I'm sure he cared a lot about his music, but
smoking.
It's very authentic. Like it's very, very raw throughout his entire.
Yeah. My friend Kaylee, he said to me way back in high school, was like, because I was trying to sing in the band, and he was like, just listen to Kurt Cobain, man. It doesn't matter what your voice sounds like. You just got to be in tune. But I want to make one note about Kurt Cobain's singing, because there's a bad habit that I picked up throughout the years that he does all the time, and it's kind of a sign of like an amateur singer, but it's also a sign of like rock music, because it's a lot of just like, guys just singing. They sing in the easiest way. And one thing he'll do is he'll instead of singing the actual vowel of a particular word, he'll sing the easiest vowel for him to sing, and just kind of twist the word into that sound. This is a pretty subtle thing. So if you listen, next time you're listening to it, if you really want to deep dive on his voice, listen to how he shapes the vowel sounds. It's called like singing the diphthong, because it's like an example would be going, if it's an I sound, like an I in a note, maybe it's easier for you to sing an E, so you sing it like I, and you've just kind of shaped it into an E. So he does that a lot, and I didn't realize that till way later, till like I studied vocals and stuff, because he's always in tune. So
because his lyrics too, because he'll break up words and stuff to make it fit to fit the song, and he's one of those. He has one of those lyrics where when you're listening to it, you're like, what the hell is he saying? But then when you're reading along with it, it's all so clear. Like, everything he's saying is super clear. But the second you're like, when you have no idea what he's saying, you have no idea what he's saying, because it's like so unclear. And I think partially it's because he changes the pronunciation of words. He breaks up words.
Yeah, it's more about just getting the melody across.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I know, like when he's doing like live versions, sometimes he'll like change the lyrics entirely and like mess with them, so it makes it even harder to follow.
Yeah. I remember listening to live versions a lot, and I was trying to teach in Bloom, and my students, and I kept singing some live versions where I don't know what words he's changing, but they're like, that's not how it goes. Why do you keep doing that? Oh, goddamn. Damn it. Too much history with Nirvana.
Oh, the knows not what he means. Don't know what he means.
Don't know. Oh yeah, no, it's not. Yeah, no. All our shitty songs. I think he did shitty songs at some point, and I kept singing shitty songs instead of. Yeah.
Pretty songs.
Yeah. Whatever.
So I guess we can kick this off by asking, what is the biggest song from this album? Who wants to go first?
At first, I thought it was going to be one of those, because whenever I think of Nirvana, it just seems like how we took it in, like everything at once. So it just seemed, especially when you think of Nevermind, you think of any song from Nevermind can be played on the radio at any time. You could even hear a live version of it on the radio at any time. And I thought that in Utero was the same thing, but when I was looking closer, it's not. It's definitely Heart-Shaped Box.
That song was huge.
Yeah, it was huge. I guess it was only single too, and this album wasn't as well received as Nevermind at the time. But yeah, I was actually kind of shocked by that. I thought it was gonna be one of those, because other than that and All Apologies, everything else is a lot lower compared to Nevermind.
Would have been Penny Royalty. Would have been.
Yeah, that's up there too. Actually, I think those are the 3 biggest songs on like Spotify and YouTube for streams.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I didn't check Spotify, but I just had Heart-Shaped Box because I'm like, this song was everywhere, and especially this album version, because like when you look at All Apologies, you might hear like the unplugged version or a different version of that, but like Heart-Shaped Box was just had the video.
It's
it was
this version, yeah.
Yeah, because when you look on Spotify, it goes for Nirvana, Smells Like Teen Spirit, Come As You Are, Heart-Shaped Box, then Lithium, Man Who Sold the World, the lot on MTV Unplugged, About a Girl, Where Did You Sleep Last Night, Lake of Fire. It seems like a lot of people love the live and like the Unplugged.
Yeah, that was huge.
Yeah. But yeah, it's the only songs from this album are Heart-Shaped Box, All Apologies, and Dumb. Dumb was up there too.
Yeah, Dumb you hear a lot on the radio.
Yeah. I actually
another song they played on the Unplugged that people.
True.
Yeah, I actually remember the parents of a friend of mine when I was really young. I think it was maybe grade 6 or grade 7. They were like, "Yeah, I like that album. I like this version of Nirvana. It's more like poetry." This was the Unplugged in New York thing, so that might be why it gets it's more palatable to a lot of people.
Oh, yeah, and they do a lot of covers, and a lot of their songs kind of fit the mold of the the acoustic setup very well, especially songs like Dumb and Penny Royalty and All Apologies.
Yeah.
Song Polly, I think they played too, which is him like a guitar.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, I agree. What did you say, Ryan, for the biggest song?
Well, Heart-Shaped Box, I agree. I mean, that intro guitar is pretty much iconic. Like, it's one of those things that I'll teach in like a collection of famous riffs, guitar riffs. So just the intro to Heart-Shaped Box, as well as like Come As You Are and Smells Like Teen Spirit. So they got a lot of iconic guitar intros.
Yeah, those hooks, especially on the first album, are just like insane. Like they all kind of, after a while, they kind of like blur together, but like they're also distinct at the same time. Like you can't Come As You Are and like In Bloom, you're not going to mix up. Like they're very distinct.
That's true. Yeah, there's some really great riffs on here too, and I kind of feel like they're just like a little messier, and there's something nice about that. Like Very Ape, that has got a sweet. It's almost reminiscent of like Love Buzz or something on Bleach. Like it's got that sort of scale in it.
I was gonna say because they always play with those like. You always hear it like those kind of like more Eastern sounding like lead parts, and it's purely from covering Shocking Blue. Like you hear the influence coming from that. But yeah, I love Very Ape. That guitar riff is
so
amazing.
Good. I always thought
even like I believe the Prodigy sampled it for Voodoo People or like.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, they did.
Yeah, I always thought that song was too short. By the time it was over, I'm like, give me another verse. I think what is it? Oh, it is pretty short.
Yeah.
Oh my God, it's 1:56. It's very short.
And then after, I mean, they follow up with Milk It, which is probably their most aggressive song, right?
Yeah.
My favorite song on the album. Best song. Best drums. Best guitar solo. And that's why I started off with those lyrics. Weirdest lyrics. Yeah.
Yeah. So I it's not my favorite, but I will add that it's hard not to bob your head when they have those music breaks, and it's just like he's like laughing at one point. It's like just everything is like so catchy and great about that song. It's a good song. It's one of those songs too where I probably didn't like it as much maybe when I was younger or when I first heard the album, but now when I hear it, it's like one of my favorites because I liked it less, and I'm like I owe it more respect than I gave it back then.
Yeah. Yeah. Actually, the reason I picked the lyrics for that is because I remember sometime, again, this is like grade 8, grade 7, I wrote the lyrics out, like just in my book, in my notes or something. And somebody read them, and obviously nobody knows Nirvana at this point. You know, nobody our age was listening to Nirvana, and they were just like, "What the hell does that mean?" I was like, "Oh shit!" Just like trying to hide up my Nirvana lyrics. It's like I hope the teacher doesn't send me to the counselor or something. But yeah,
I was like growing up too. I was more drawn to the more aggressive and like the sloppier stuff, like Variate, Milk It, Radio Friendly Unit Shifter, Tourette's, and like Sentineless Apprentice. Like those were the songs I was always like the most drawn to. So my favorite has always sort of bounced around between those songs. But if I had to pick one, I'd probably go Sentineless Apprentice because I was digging that song a lot this week.
really,
But again, like it changes all the time. I remember last year I was listening to a lot of Frances Farmer will have her revenge on Seattle.
good song.
For some reason, I was playing it like once a day. Like there was like maybe a 6-month stretch where I put on a playlist and was listening to it all the time. So for them, it's like I was saying, and like other like for Tool and stuff, it's not always like one song because it's like the connection. You know, I've had this album for like 30 years, so it's hard to
It's true.
kind of
I
change.
I think I just settled on Milk It because there's a certain appreciation aside from me just loving how high energy it is. There's like an appreciation for like try counting to 4 throughout that song. Dave Grohl kind of shifts where you think 4 is because he comes in I think he comes in on 2 on a crash cymbal. So and then when the verse settles in, then suddenly you get where there's this 4. So it's just this really cool. I don't know. It's like probably the most mature writing of everything, even though it has a weird atonal guitar solo.
And I remember too, like when I first heard that song, it just seemed random. Like, oh, they just went in the studio and were just dicking around. But then when you hear live versions of it, it's the same thing.
Yeah.
So it's like that's the song. It's not random at all. Like they wrote it that way.
Yeah.
Right.
Anyway.
Which is another thing too. Like Nirvana, I listen to a lot of live stuff. So it's not necessarily if I go back to listen to like Sentineless Apprentice or Variape or something, it might be a live version because there's so many live videos online, especially on YouTube, like high quality, like and put on MTV and stuff like that. I have a couple of DVDs that I watch from time to time as well. Like a few months ago, I lent them to a buddy, and he ripped them all. And then he was talking about him. He's like, "Oh, this one was great. This one was great." So I was like, rewatching them. This was like a year and a half ago. So yeah, their live stuff's really good too.
Yeah, that was one of the things that definitely got me into them because at the same time, I was getting into the music. There was all this footage available. Like there was VHS tapes that I remember watching of just like concerts of Nirvana. I remember one particular. I have no idea what it's called or whatever, but they were wearing lab coats, I think, and they of course, they smashed everything at the end.
I believe that's Live at Reading. I have that on DVD. Yeah.
It's a good one. Good one.
Yeah, and that was something they were known for, right? Like smashing their instruments on stage. Like that's what they were popular for, really famous.
Yeah, because I also have like the Live at the Paramount, which is where the footage from the what music video is that? Drain You? Is it Drain You? One of the Nevermind music videos takes a lot from that Paramount performance. And yeah, on that they play Endless Nameless and they trash everything. I believe Reading, they play Endless Nameless. That's always how they trash. They play Endless Nameless, trash everything.
That's awesome.
I remember there's a funny story Dave Grohl told. He's like, talking about when he first joined Nirvana. He's like, you know, I joined Nirvana. I was finally making money, and I went out and I bought this like kick drum pedal. I kind of put it off because it was kind of expensive, and I finally bought like a nice one. I finally like spoiled myself. It's like first show, fucking trashed it. They just trashed the whole drum set. From that moment on, I knew not to use the good stuff, or at least to switch it out at the end.
Right before the last song. Yeah, totally.
I saw, and you will know us by the Trail of Dead. They trashed their stuff too, but that's what they did. They played, and then at the end, when they were doing their encore, they came out with all these like crappy, older, beat up guitars. I'm like, oh, okay, I see what's going on here.
Yeah.
Guitars are out.
Yeah.
I've done that a couple times. I think I gently pushed over my drum kit once. I'm like, don't break anything.
Onto a pillow.
Yeah. And we're good.
It's after talking last week about how My Bloody Valentine ends their show, I think I prefer to watch a band smash their stuff than destroy my eardrums for half an hour.
The whole idea, I believe, was taken from The Who, where it's to not play an encore. To just trash the shit so you don't have to play an encore, you just bounce.
Yep, you're done.
But when you look at but in their defense, when you look at Nirvana's set list, they're fucking long. They play for like over an hour. So
yeah, I did read that like originally it started. I think they started doing it like around Bleach, and they pretty much did it just to end their sets early, or if they had a lot of issues with drummers early on, so if it wasn't working out, they would just like destroy their stuff and walk off stage, almost in protest to like their own band.
The drummer sucks. We're gonna break everything. Oh man,
it's a revolving door. But
and it's funny how they.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say it's funny how they go from not being able to find a drummer to finding arguably one of the best rock drummers of the past 30 years.
Yeah.
So like, funny story about that, because when they when they were inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, the three of them were, and then who was the other guy's name? I got it up here.
Pat Smear.
Yeah, he found out through text message that he wasn't getting inducted.
Oh, you mean the original drummer? You mean
like Chad Channing from '88?
Chad Channing, okay, yeah.
He did Bleach.
Yeah.
Man, Bleach was like an underground thing. I remember even when we were getting it, it was like, oh, I found Bleach at the record store. It's like a rare thing. That was not. You can't claim to be a part of Nirvana for being on Bleach. Sorry.
It's 1/3 of their studio content.
I know he was there.
No, Incesticide counts, man. Don't write that up.
I don't know. Bleach is a great album. Yeah, he plays on Incesticide as well.
Does he? Oh,
yeah. Okay. Yeah, because that has like a bunch of different sessions. It's mainly Dave Grohl, but there's Chad Channing and then some other guy like Dale Cover or something like that. Some other guy.
Yeah.
Probably have the name wrong.
Yeah, you're right.
Okay, so they reused some old B-sides, but like, let's be honest, Nirvana became Nirvana with Nevermind, in the eyes of the Hall of Fame, anyway.
It's almost like the movie The Wonders. When the drummer joins Shades, the band really comes into their own.
So for my favorite, I had Francis Farmer. I thought that was pretty good. Like you said before, Nice, you kind of bounce around on favorites. Like growing up, my favorite was probably like Heart Shaped Box. But like now that I've heard that song like a million times, it's like on my list for songs I skip now. But before we kick off to songs you skip, just a few things about Frances Farmer. We'll have her revenge on Seattle. Kurt Cobain favored long titles because everybody else was doing one-word short titles in the 90s. That was the big thing. And I love the different sounds on that track, especially like where they really kind of break it down or rock out like around 2:30, the midpoint, and it's really good stuff.
Yeah, I love the bass line. The bass line is so good.
Yeah, the bass and the drums, like in the verses, I just love that sound. It's just sort of like bubbling there.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And then I just love how noisy the guitars are and everything. That's one of my favorites too, Gordon. Like I was saying last year, I was listening to that song all the time. I don't know why. It just sort of, came to mind, and I just kept playing it for some reason.
It's a good build up. Yeah, it's weird. Oh man. Yeah, when that one comes on, some of them when they come on, I'm like, oh yeah, there's another rock out song on this album. I don't know, like I don't get that same vibe from Nevermind. I mean, maybe it's just because I haven't listened to it as much anymore.
Well, Nevermind is more just like a bunch of. It's funny because back then, it was like grunge music. It's so different and blah blah. But when you actually break it down, there's just a bunch of like very good pop songs, like power pop. It's just like a collection of just a bunch of amazing tracks. Whereas I feel when it comes to this, I know it's like a part of a whole genre, and it's like the genre defining, changed the whole generation and all that stuff. I agree. One of the best of that era of those albums. But for me, just In Utero, it has more character to it. I feel like that's when they became, it was more attuned to their sound. Like when you listen to Bleach, what they were doing there, this seems more of the continuation. Whereas Nevermind is just a bunch of collection of great tracks. There are, peaks and valleys in there too. There's songs I like more than other songs, and that's an amazing album I revisit all the time, and it is important and everything. But I feel like In Utero just has a lot more character to it.
Yeah.
I think that one because of the production. Like if Steve Albini did that instead of Butch Vig, it would have been maybe more what you're looking for.
Maybe because Kurt Cobain famously didn't like the production on Nevermind. He complained about it. He said it was too clean cut and too pop sounding.
Yeah.
Which, I don't know, when you listen to it, you're like, well, the songs aren't very, they're great, poppy songs, but it's not very pop. Like, my parents probably wouldn't like it.
Yeah.
They might now, but yeah, no, this one, it just seems more of what they were trying to do, especially when you listen to the early stuff, when you listen to this, what they're influenced by and what they were trying to do and their live shows. This was more akin to their live stuff.
It's basically like between Nevermind and In Utero, there's like a Pixies dial, and you just dial up the Pixies as you get closer to In Utero. That's kind of what it is, because that's like the weird shit that they like, that they wanted to do, which I'm sure the record companies were like, you guys are weird enough. We don't need out-of-tune note solos. Just play the damn vocal melody on the guitar.
I believe Steve Albini produced for the Pixies as well.
Yeah.
I don't know if this was mentioned, but he did produce Surfer Rosa.
Yeah. Yeah, so
a previous album we talked about, or an album we previously discussed.
Yeah.
So we can get into, or sorry, not get into, but the next question I guess here could be song you skip. I'll just pick it off because I mentioned it earlier. This week I kind of skipped over. I listened to In Utero a whole bunch of times this week because it's only 41 minutes. But near the end, especially today, I was starting to skip Heart Shaped Box. Just I've heard it too much. It's overplayed.
You know what? Yeah. Oh, go ahead, Anise.
No, you can go, Ryan.
Well, you know why I still never skip that song is because that song kind of taught me how to, in some way, I mean, when I was younger, it got me started singing harmonies. If you listen to the verses, there's two voices going on, and they're very, very clearly like a melody, counter melody sort of thing. So it's basically a vocal exercise, the whole song, so I just sing it. Maybe I would skip it if I was walking down the street or something, because I can't sing along without looking like a weirdo. But if I can sing, I'm not going to skip that song. But anyway, just wanted to mention that about the harmonies.
I kind of know what Gordon was saying, though, because I remember even back, because again, like I was saying, when I got into them, that was their only single, that was the newest single out, so it was getting a lot of play on Much Music, and I remember after a while just sort of getting sick of it. I don't know what it is about that song, but it's I like the song, but it's not a song I can kind of listen to on repeat over and over and over again. I think it might do that. Hey, wait.
It's the chorus, yeah. I was gonna say it's the chorus.
Yeah.
That's why their comeback song didn't do so well, because it's just yeah. It's just like
I like that song.
I know, but I can't listen to it a whole lot because the chorus is not quite, doesn't match the verse's greatness. That's all.
Yeah, I think the one benefit of that song is it's only on a greatest hits, and came out later. So there was that instant radio play when it did come out, but now it's kind of faded away. So I don't feel that with You Oughta, or You Know You're Right. You ought to know. You know you're right. But I know what you mean. I know what you mean there, Ryan.
What do you skip, Anise? Did you already say what you skipped? Serve the Servants?
Probably, yeah. Serve the Servants, and it's probably purely because of placement, because it is a good song, but I don't think it's the album worthy.
No.
I think Serve the Servants is would have been a much better opening track. Soundless Apprentice would have been a much better track. I just feel Serve the Servants is kind of their most boring, straightforward song on the album.
I can see why you would say that. It is kind of almost Beatles-esque. It's just like a melody and a nice sing-along chorus, but I think because that's why it should have been first. Their whole thing is we're different. Yeah. So if they started off with the banger again, It would have been like, oh, here they are, Nirvana again with a banger. But instead, they hit you with Teenage Angst has paid off well. It's like, oh shit, that was all just fakery, or like, they already start you thinking, and
Yeah.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, like, but I just mean more like musically. It's just sort of boring musically. Like, yeah, the lyrically, it does a different thing, and it's kind of being very meta and speaking on like the state of the band. But just like
Yeah.
as songs wise, it's kind of the least interesting song on the album.
It's kind of it is probably the most like pop song. Oh, well, maybe All Apologies you could make an argument, but it is just like, yeah, it's just a pop song. Like you could cover that with an acoustic guitar and you have no idea it was
Yeah,
Nirvana.
yeah, like that's a song that they probably would have played it. Like I'm surprised they didn't. They could have played at the Unplugged show.
But I like it more than Scentless Apprentice. I do, because
I
those
love
drums are a pain in the ass. No, I don't know. I just yeah.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I'll just point out what I skip. I skip dumb.
Oh, do you?
Yeah, I don't know. It's just kind of too repetitive. I think I'm dumb. I think I'm dumb.
I know what you mean. I know what you mean. I probably listened to the Unplugged version more than the version on here.
Yeah.
But I also like as a kid, I didn't like. I was like a 10-year-old. Like, I'm not dumb. I'm not going to sing along to this.
Yeah, yeah. You gotta do heroin first.
Yeah.
Get it. Yeah, no. For dumb, I actually had that as my underrated because I do hear that. The reason being, I do hear that a lot on the radio, but it's one of the singles that I'm not like. I don't go to skip it, kind of like Heart Shaped Box, and I really like the cello in it. I find they only use the cello on one other song.
All Apologies.
Never mind on what is it? Underneath or something in the way. They use cello on that, and they use cello on this. It really stands out, but it works really well, like in that song, and even though it's only used on that one track, it works really well on the album. So that's why I think Dumb is a little bit of an underrated track, and I also like his like deliveries, like I think I'm dumb or maybe just happy, and then the cello like takes off, so it works really well. That's my favorite part of the song.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I guess maybe I skip it because I'm going for Very Ape. I love that song. So I'm like, I want to go from banger to banger to banger, and it's just a little bit of a break in between them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. For my the underrated, I had Radio Friendly Unit Shifter.
Yeah.
That was always one of my favorites. Like it heavily, like I was saying before, it heavily influenced like my guitar playing, and just looking at the stream counts on YouTube and stuff, and just like even on Genius, how much it's like read up on and stuff. It's probably like one of their lowest on this album, and I'm like, this is one of my favorite songs. But I guess that's my disconnect from the. But it's I don't know, it's Nirvana, so they provide so much different sounds, especially on this album.
So,
But yeah, that song always stood out to me as one of my favorites, even like as the first time I heard it, and even like listening to the album again today. Like it's always sort of stood out for me. It's kind of funny that it's not as appreciated, it seems, by the masses.
yeah.
Oh, sorry. Oh,
Well,
when I mentioned earlier, like the tracks, some of the vocal tracks are muted. This is one of them where I was like, I know they're not going for a shoegaze thing, but like it seems like the tracks are buried in the music. This one and I think the first track were the two that I really stood out in that regard for me.
Yeah, it's because it's more of the like the noise rock.
Mm-hmm.
Like what's that? I'm trying to trying to think of that band, the noise rock band. Fuck,
My
I can't
Bloody
think of-
Valentine? No, Sonic Youth.
No. It'll come to mind. It'll come.
Yeah.
Gordon will.
Are they newer or older?
They were from the early 2000s. They had an album come out last year, though, I believe. They were like a duo.
Japan Droids?
You know.
Yeah, no. I'll think of it.
Keep going. I'll come up with it.
Yeah. Not like holy fuck.
No.
Not noisy enough. Not guitar-y enough.
Just keep going. I'll think of it. Cool.
Oh, sorry. Sorry, just to go back to the first track, what you were saying. I think it. Sorry, just to jump back. I think the first track serves the purpose of just kind of like it kind of sets you up for the album, because if they went into like the Scentless Apprentice, it might call back to like their previous stuff. But with the noisiness of Serve the Servants, it kind of like sets you up for what you're going to hear on the rest of the album.
Yeah, if you think of it like a movie soundtrack, imagine starting the the movie with that scene, the scene for Serve the Servants. It's just a different feel. Like it's a totally different. It's like they give you this feeling only to pull the rug out because it's like a movie that may start with a clip of the storyline that actually happens later, but they throw it at the beginning. That's a pretty typical.
It's
you know.
yeah, it's like a table setter.
Yeah. That's table.
I don't know.
set.
I've just never been the biggest fan of that of Serve the Servants. I don't know.
To each their own. No big deal.
Yeah, it's fine.
Yeah, no, I also totally agree with you that I like Scentless Apprentice better as a song, but in the context of the album, I understand why it kicks it off. So sorry, what were you saying before, Ryan?
I just wanted to. We talked about underrated songs, but like Very Ape, I wanted to make sure that was in there as an underrated song, and I want to make sure also Tourette's was in there because those are two awesome bangers. Like sometimes I remember when I was younger, I would do this all the time. I would skip through just the most intense songs. I would just go through the most intense ones and just listen to those, and those were always obviously on there, like Tourette's and Radio Friendly Unit Shifter and Francis Farmer, Very Ape, Milk It.
Well, those were the songs, like I was saying earlier. Those are the songs I was first drawn to.
Yeah.
Like especially as like a 9-10-year-old kid, it was just like, whoa, I just want like the most aggressive songs I can find.
Pretty much, yeah. And you don't get that level of aggression on Nevermind. It doesn't come across as so dirty and raunchy on Nevermind. Even when Kurt Cobain's screaming, it sounds cleaner. Like when he's screaming here, it's like his voice is going a little bit more out of tune. It's like cracking up a little bit more, and that really adds to the emotion, especially given the story and the state of where Kurt Cobain was at this point. It really fits.
Yeah, so I mean, I could talk a little bit about the recording process. Like, so Kurt Cobain always said this. I don't know how true this is, but you mentioned it earlier, Ryan, that like Kurt Cobain didn't care about the lyrics and all that stuff. I think he probably cared more than he let on. But at the same time, apparently the vocal tracks were all laid down within 6 hours. This whole album was actually like the whole recording process on this album was very compressed. So they had some demos before. They recruited Steve Albini, and they pretty much recorded on, I don't know if he has a ranch, he has like a place that's secluded where his studio is. So it was pretty much just the band, Steve Albini, and an engineer. And it was just the 5 of them, and they requested nobody interrupt them during this whole recording process. So I think the dates of the recording are just kind of like 2 weeks in February. And the first 3 days, they didn't have their equipment, so they had to wait for it to arrive through mail. And they finally got the equipment. Then they laid down the tracks. They pretty much start midday recording, break for lunch, break for dinner, and then record about into midnight or whatever. And all of the songs were recorded kind of live, except for the faster drumming songs. Those were recorded separately. And to create the sound of that, basically, what Steve Albini did was he'd mic up Dave Grohl, his drums, with 30 microphones. They would record those drums in a kitchen setting, so there was a lot of reverberation in the house and stuff like that. And he just let him do his thing. And he's like, when you got a great drummer, all you need to do is mic him properly, and you've done your part.
Yeah, pretty much.
So, so the recording was done from February 12th to February 26th. And I think the album didn't come out until September, but the issues came in with like the mixing and the studio or the record label, DGC, David Geffen Company, didn't like the mix. They thought it was unreleasable. So they got REM's, I think his name's Stephen Litt, to come in and remix some of the tracks.
Interesting. Now, just getting back to one comment you just kind of glazed over. 30 microphones? Did you say 30?
That's 30 microphones.
I thought Steve Albini was known for using very few microphones on the kit. 30 microphones. That's insane. Like, what are you going to... that can't be true. I don't believe that. That's bullshit. That's like lore.
So he surrounded it. I don't know if he mic'd it specifically, but he surrounded the drum kit with 30 microphones. But yeah, that's
whatever, man. I think you just had 30 microphones. Yeah. See, I wonder how many of those microphones he used. Maybe he had 30 microphones and 4 of them were on, but whatever.
Because I know I did see it also that they often, rather than redoing takes, they would often keep in like bad takes, or he left everything up to Kurt. He's like, you decide. He's like, I probably have my own opinions, but I'm not going to state them. You're going to pick the tracks that you want to do. This is your
album. Like all over this album, you can hear little screw ups and mess ups like all over the album. Like it's not like glaring, but it's one of those once you hear them, you can't.
They don't sound. I don't think anything sounds bad.
Well, nothing's really bad. I'm sure if something was really bad, they'd cut it. But
yeah.
It
does sound like the drum fills, like in All Apologies and stuff. They sound like they're just improv. Like he just I'm just gonna do them, and that's the way they ended up, and that's why I can never predict what they are.
And I figured out the noise rock band I was trying to think of. No Age. No Age.
Oh, nice. Yeah, I would have never. I haven't heard that band in like a long time.
I forget the context of why I was bringing them up, but No Age, they're good. Listen to them.
All right.
Early noise band or noise band. And then just to kind of add on to the recording, so Steve Albini's very like anti-record label. He likes to do. He's all about like the artist. It's their album. It's nobody. There should be no other influences. So for this album, he recommended that the band cover all the costs on their own dime, and so that way they don't have to worry about interference with the label and things like that. So this album was recorded for $24,000. Steve Albini took his flat fee of $100,000, and he refused to accept any royalties because he's like, I'm the producer, and any producer who has any artistic influence on the production of the album isn't a producer, and they shouldn't be like looking for royalties. So apparently he's lost out on over like $500,000 in royalties.
Well, like
I'm sure he's getting by.
I heard this story about Steve Albini. Like I read it on Reddit, so you don't know how true it is. It was just some guy on Reddit. But there was like some article, I think it was about In Utero specifically, and there was a picture of Steve Albini in the article. Because I think it might have even been about Steve Albini or the production, something about the anniversary of In Utero. This was a few years ago. And some guy on Reddit's like, yo, that guy plays poker. Has been playing poker with me and my friends for like the past like 20 years or some shit. Like apparently he like was a friend of a friend, joined their poker game, and he's like, I've only just known him as Steve. Like I didn't know what his job was. I didn't know what he did. Like I didn't know he produced for Nirvana and like all these bands and stuff. And I just find it funny, like, and it makes sense for like him not taking royalties and stuff. He just seemed pretty, as controversial of a person as he is. If you read about him, he seems pretty down to earth and pretty.
Yeah.
Like poker on Wednesdays.
Working man's man. That's cool. I mean that was good advice because, like I mentioned last week, the record companies typically will loan the band a bunch of money, and then you'll be stuck having to pay off this loan that you didn't even decide how it was. It was like, we're gonna loan you money, but we're gonna spend it for you. It's like a bunch of bullshit. So you don't need $100,000, $300,000, $1 million to record an album. What did they do? 25 grand? Did you say they did this?
Don't they normally, like when you use a studio too? I don't know how true this is, but isn't it like they'll just deduct money for different expenses, even though it might even be you and two other people in the studio, but they'll be like engineer costs, producer costs, this cost, that cost, and it's like, but it was just two guys. Like,
because the way the deals work is like the band doesn't see any of their royalties until they've paid off that debt. So the record label has every incentive to build their own recording studio, a bunch of extra shit. So they're just seeing more of the royalties until finally that shit is paid off. Yeah, it's a bunch of bullshit.
Yeah. So I guess, does that wrap up our song questions? Let me just double check here. Going back to the cheap cost, one last thing. I did see some of the reviews or the critics at the time came out, and I'm paraphrasing, but they were essentially saying it's like, oh, this album sounds cheap. You think the biggest band in the world would have like a better like actual copy recording. Like it just sounds cheap.
You don't get it, man.
See, that's one of my biggest complaints about most bands is that when they get more money, it isn't even that their musically much changes. It's more like production-wise things change. And when that starts changing and you start getting cleaner sounds, the vocals are a lot crisper and higher in the mix, and you start playing with all this stuff, you kind of lose the essence of the band. Like a band like Weezer, you listen to the Blue album, and Rivers is like screaming to be like heard and like say it ain't so and stuff. Like he's trying to scream above the music. But then when you get to their newer stuff, it's just produced like a pop song. It's just produced pretty clean.
Yeah.
Whereas that's kind of the issue with Nevermind. It was more of the polished poppy sound to it, whereas this kind of went back to the more like independent sounding, punk sounding, or whatever they were trying to do, because that's the bands they like. They listen to bands like Flipper and the Germs, and the bands they listened to weren't polished and clean. They weren't listening to the big glam rock or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting how it happened in reverse with Nirvana. Like, I mean, if you don't count Bleach, most people's introduction was Nevermind, and so everybody got this polished version of Nirvana. So when an Utero came along, they're like, "Well, what happened?" So, well, you just didn't understand that was them. Like, watch the live shows.
Well, and you have to assume too, like Nevermind was their first on Geffen, so that was their first major label. So I doubt they had much control over the finished product. Whereas after Nevermind came out, they became such giants that they could do whatever they wanted, and this is what they did.
Yeah, the label was probably like, how can we clean this up to make it as palatable, as possible? So,
yeah.
Or maybe it was Butch Vig did it.
So I guess this can take us on to the artwork question. So I was able to dig out the CD. I found it just before we came on. And then it was funny because you sent, Ryan, you sent a video to like our chat before of like, was it people on college campus like reviewing Grohl or listening to it for the first time? So this is like in '93. And I remember the moment where they're like reading the track listing and they got to like turn the CD around. I'm like, oh yeah, I totally forgot about that. That was like a unique thing on the back. But I guess I can open it up and take a look. So some quick liner notes or some a lot of the collages that you see of the like anatomy and stuff like that. That's something that always fascinated Kurt Cobain. You can tell in his lyrics and stuff like that. So he was the one that kind of put that stuff together. Originally, they wanted to name this album "I Hate Myself and I Want to Die" because that's what Kurt Cobain always, when anybody would ask him like, "Hey, how are you doing?" he would just reply with that.
There was a song by Nirvana named that. It was on the. I remember I had this CD. It was like a Beavis and Butthead soundtrack or something, and that song was on it.
Yeah, I do remember this.
Yeah, that CD was actually kind of interesting. It also had like Red Hot Chili Peppers covering "Search and Destroy" by the Stooges. It had like a Megadeth song, and like I had like an Anthrax. It was kind of all over the place, but the album opened with "I Hate Myself and I Want to Die" by Nirvana, but there was also an intro of Beavis and Butthead introing the album, and it was part of the song. So listening to the song always involved hearing Beavis and Butthead. And it's on Spotify. That whole soundtrack, that Beavis and Butthead soundtrack.
Jokes.
So was it for their show or Beavis and Butthead? I guess it had to have been for the show, not Do America.
Yeah, the show.
Right.
Because the movie was Love Roller Coaster.
Right. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, I'll check those out. I mean, it's funny because there's some other podcasts that I listen to that like talk about '90s music, and it often references Beavis and Butthead episodes. Like, let's see what Beavis and Butthead had to say about that. So it's pretty funny because I think I have a comment for pretty much everything. It covers so much.
Yeah.
Yeah, actually, I remember watching Beavis and Butthead to watch Nirvana videos because occasionally there would be a Nirvana video in there. I can't.
They did like Sliver.
Yeah, Sliver. That's the one.
They might have done "Smells Like Teen Spirit." I forgot.
Yeah, so funny.
So I want to ask you guys, how often is this album in your rotation?
It's not really in my rotation. Like it's just like my first band that I really got into. So when I go back, I can't go to Nirvana that often. Like, how much can you listen to the same music over and over throughout your whole life?
Yeah.
And like I said last week, like, you don't want to kill completely your association from when you first got to know the album. That being said, though, I'll go back to songs here and there quite a bit. Probably, I won't go by a year without hearing something from this album.
Yeah. Yeah, for me, it's the same. I was really back when I was first getting into rock music. Obviously, it was huge, and then in high school when I was getting into, when the internet became a thing, I was getting into more like B sides and older bands and stuff. I kind of had another resurgence of them at that point, but now it's just sort of songs here and there, maybe live videos here and there. It isn't really throwing an album on and playing through. Like this week was the first time I listened through Bleach, Nevermind, Incesticide, and In Utero, and I don't even know how long. Because normally, like I said, like last year, I was listening to Francis Farmer a bunch,
Yeah.
or I'll throw on, just Tourette's I might throw on, or Barry Ape I might play, or a Scentless Apprentice. Never Serve the Servants, but occasionally I'll play every other song. But but like it's more just like a random thing. Like if we're playing like '90s songs or a group of friends are together, we're playing music. Maybe a Nirvana song will make its way in, but it's not really in my rotation as much as it was like in my youth.
Yeah. I'll just before I let you answer, Gordon, I want to make note that maybe I'll listen to this album. I'll bring it back once every 3 or 4 or 5 years or 6. I don't know. I'm getting old. It's hard to tell. But I'll go back to it and I'll immediately be like, oh yeah, this is the thing. This is Nirvana. This immediately brings me back. This is the album I do that with for Nirvana. I don't really do that with any of their albums anymore. Any of the other albums. Like it's if I go to listen to Incesticide now, straight through, it's been, I don't know, 10 or 15 years. So it's not my, if there is a regular rotation album, it's this one.
Incesticide is interesting though, because you kind of see them testing stuff out almost.
Yeah.
You kind of get the in-between stuff, and you get them covering stuff, and like a song like Aneurysm, there's nothing like it on any other albums. It's kind of pretty unique, and it's on there. And then even like you get the Polly, the more upbeat version, which is kind of cool to hear. And I don't know, it's kind of an interesting listen.
I love that album too. I do. It was like their weirder second album, non-album. And yeah, you could see, okay, they're doing stuff. They're being more creative. They're being more playful. So you got to see that side.
That might have actually been one of the. I might have heard that album first. Now that I'm thinking of it, because I remember my cousin had In Utero and that, and like, Nevermind almost. Sorry, we're cutting into Gordon's answer here, for a while, it almost seemed like Nevermind, like Nirvana in general, even kind of became not faux pas to listen to, but it just became like the expected answer. Like, who's your favorite band, or who do you listen to? Nirvana. Like, oh, what else? Everyone listens to Nirvana.
Right.
So then you had like your Bush and your Stone Temple Pilots and your Silverchairs and your all that era of rock music sort of kind of took over Nirvana, because like those albums were kind of older by the time you got to the later 90s, and yeah, I don't know.
And they were weirder. Like aside from Nevermind, there's a lot of like weird quirkiness to Nirvana that a lot of people, maybe they just want to hear Razorblade Suitcase. It's nice and clean,
That's true. But yeah, Gordon, you're.
Oh yeah, no, sorry. Yeah, just to kind of add on to what you guys are saying about Insecticide. It was. I think it was rushed together. Well, it was rushed together by the studio because they wanted to have another album come out late 1992. So they're like, let's just scrape together all the stuff. So it was actually a joint venture between DGC and Sub Pop, who released Bleach. So it was a joint venture, and that's how they were able to put these songs together. So that's why you had to wait until '93. But they were touring a lot. There was a lot more going on, so that's why they couldn't just hit the studio when the label wanted them to.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because they also did the same thing with the Smashing Pumpkins, the way they released their B-side.
Right. That's another example.
Yeah, it's weird. Like the Pumpkins and Nirvana, these were the two bands that really got me into music, and they both had this like weird second non-album. Of course, I'm not including Bleach again or Gish.
It's not like now where, if your album hits, you can release maybe a couple of singles on Spotify or do a bunch of features or whatever people do now to kind of keep their name around. Back then, you had to release another album or an EP or something. You had to do something to stay in people's minds.
Yeah.
get played on the radio, you need some singles or something for the radio.
Yeah, exactly.
But that being said, I don't think there was much played on the radio from Incesticide.
Well, Sliver is a big one.
Sliver. They played Sliver.
And yeah, I think
Beavis and Butthead.
And then Aneurysm was more of like a Muddy Banks thing, but
Yeah.
like you hear those aggressive songs on the radio now, and it seems like Aneurysm. I'm pretty sure you weren't hearing that in the '90s, but you hear it now because everybody just has grown to love Nirvana. You know, it's not out of place to play a song that aggressive.
well, yeah. At this point, like it's pretty safe to say you could probably hear any Nirvana song on the radio, and it wouldn't be weird.
Yeah, so I'll jump off there because that's where my rotation I wanted to ask you guys about. So I generally listen to Nirvana. I'll do like kind of like what I said on Pearl Jam, where every 10 years I'll go back and I'll dedicate a week or a few days listening to it just to revisit it. But I think the problem is, and it's through no fault of their own, that their music is played so much on the radio that when you listen to like Nevermind and In Utero, you pretty much know every single song because it's so familiar. It never really leaves like there's no hidden gem anymore. There's no mystery anymore. It's all gone.
That's why I can't listen to Nevermind. Like I've had to teach the guitar riff so much, and I've listened to like the In Bloom and Come as You Are and Smells Like Teen Spirit. They're just like on the radio all the time, or they actually more now. I feel like they're more on the radio now because they're like classic rock or whatever. And there's all these '90s nooners and '90s throwback stuff. I can't. Yeah, I can't go to Nevermind for that very reason. So it stays out of my rotation.
And for me too, is also really, and probably the other reason in high school I listened to them a lot was it was so ingrained with playing guitar. Like I learned so many of these songs. They're so easy to learn. Like you can learn any Nirvana song in probably like 2-3 minutes. Just need to find the bass notes and there, I can figure it out now. Like it's not too hard. It's all just power chords. And so as a young new guitar player, you learn the power chord. Wow, I can play every song by this band now. I might have learned them all one by one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I guess this kicks us off with the album ranking. I wasn't sure what you guys included. So I'll just say my ranking first, and then you guys can tell me what you added or what you included and what you did include. So for me, my ranking was I put In Utero first, just because that's more aligned of my current rock interests, how they were after the fact. I pretty much hit their discography with hindsight. Then I'll go Nevermind. It's hard to deny that. Like I was debating all week if I should put that first because it had such a gigantic impact on everything. But I put it second. It's like a 1B, I guess. And then I put the Unplugged. I listened to that one a lot, and I think it's a good album because it really shows kind of like the range. Like if you don't want to hear the heavier stuff, you might want to throw on that. It's a little bit lighter, a little easier to listen to. So I threw that in fourth, and then I did that third, and then I did Bleach fourth. Great album. It's your debut. It's more indie than anything, but there's some great bangers on there. So I can't forget that album, even though I ranked it last, and I didn't include Insecticide. How did you guys rank yours?
Gordon, you keep saying insecticide. It's incesticide.
Incesticide, yeah.
Sorry, I keep messing that up. Incesticide. I don't have it down. It's not in front of me, so I keep messing it up.
And you didn't even include it as an album?
Well, because it's not like a studio album. It's like a compilation album.
Yeah. I guess.
Yeah,
but they're all studio recordings.
But you included a live album, Gordon.
I did. I made the exception. But that live, I feel like I generally I never include live albums in my rankings for this because it's not a studio album. But I feel like this one deserves the exception just because it's so big on its own and how you hear it on the radio, how what it contributes to their as a whole.
Yeah. Well, for me, Muddy Banks is like that live. So that's like kind of. Actually, I put that as number 2 because that was my introduction to Nirvana, even though it's not a studio album. But In Utero's number 1, Muddy Banks is number 2, and number 3 I was kind of between Incesticide or the Unplugged, and I kind of put them. I both like them, but for very different reasons. And then I ended with Nevermind and Bleach. So I love Bleach, but Nevermind's just like I can't put it last. I can't put it last. It's too iconic, and it is really good. It's just worn out on me. So I probably listen to Bleach more than I would Nevermind, because it would bring me right back to that nostalgia. But Nevermind, it's like the radio signals have erased the nostalgia in my head, so my association is different now.
Yeah, I agree. Like I probably revisit songs like Love Buzz and School and Negative Creep more than I revisit a lot of songs from Nevermind. But I don't know. I didn't rank the live one just because it's live. Though I do, because for me when I listen to the Unplugged, I more so will watch it as opposed to just listen to it. And I listened to it this week on Spotify, and it's like the album version, but the DVD version is uncut. So you get the banter between songs, and there's some funny moments that aren't on the CD. Like there's a moment where Kurt tells Chris to shut up and stuff.
Yeah, yeah.
It wasn't in there, so I'm like, oh, you kind of lose those little spots there. And plus, I also I have a couple of live DVDs and I have live CDs, and I used to download a bunch of their live stuff. So if I was ranking their live stuff, I'd have so much stuff to rank. It wasn't just Muddy Banks.
Yeah, but that back in the day, that's what they had out. It was Muddy Banks. It was Unplugged.
Yeah.
It was Nevermind, Incesticide, and Utero. That was their discography.
Yeah, I get it. No, I totally get it. But I left them out. So I had In Utero, and then Nevermind, and then Incesticide and Bleach were kind of. I don't know which one I'd rank over the other, because again I revisit songs more than the album from top to bottom, and I probably I love Aneurysm, I love Sliver, I like just certain tracks from Incesticide, but I also like certain tracks from Bleach, so it's hard to choose. But yeah, probably Incesticide than Bleach, because I was introduced to Incesticide fairly early on.
Yeah,
and on a journey.
So In Utero is our favorite album. No wonder we chose this album.
I wonder if that's like a common thing with people of our generation, because we kind of came into it with a different light and a different perspective, because a lot of stuff that came out for us immediately after may have sounded more akin to Nevermind, but I feel like since when we were kind of going through our college years, something In Utero seemed like it was more like you could see that coming out. You could see that album coming out and Pitchfork reviewing it.
Yeah, right. It's more indie. It's got more dialed up Pixies. I wonder which album is Vic's favorite.
I honestly don't care.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, he's got some pretty wild conspiracy theories about Courtney Love.
Yeah. Well, I remember when I first got the internet, that was like one of the things I would use it for, just looking up Courtney Love, Kurt Cobain, fucking conspiracies, trying to figure out who killed him or did he kill himself. But the weird thing is, I have no interest in any of the documentaries now. I have no interest. No. You give me a documentary, I've never seen Montage of Heck. I've never seen Soaked in Bleach. I have no real.
I think I saw that one.
I don't know what it is. I have no real drive to watch those.
It's the story's been told so much.
Yeah.
Do they really have something new to say? Has something been uncovered?
Even just covering them for the podcast, I felt like I was a little bit adverse to it, just because what are they what are we going to add to this Nirvana conversation? They're so big.
This album is better than Nevermind. That's what we're going to add to the conversation. It is. It's just it's more the real thing. It's closer to the live show. It's closer to it. What his voice, he does, what they recorded it in a couple weeks, did all the vocals in 6 hours, is much closer to the stage. So
I agree. I think it's a more representation of what Kurt Cobain was trying to build with Nirvana. And I feel if they would have continued on, I think they would have continued on making music more similar to this, even though it isn't there isn't that drastic of a change from one album to the other. It's just more in the production and the presentation. But I feel like they would have leaned into more of this stuff. And in that interview you did send, they were talking about getting the other members involved in writing and stuff. And you did have Dave Grohl singing on Marigold. I wonder if they would have done a whole Beatles thing and maybe had Dave singing a couple of tracks on that. Because many people probably don't know, but he went on to have a popular career with another band
Really?
Them crooked
But
vultures.
Good vultures.
yeah, totally. I who knows what they because they seemed excited about writing collaboratively, which seemed to be like a new thing for them. And at this point, they didn't have to like follow anybody's
Yeah.
rules
And
because they were huge.
and at this point, Dave Grohl had that debut Foo Fighters album written, and he was playing it for people at parties, so people realized like what kind of songwriting talent he was.
Yeah,
So
yeah, and
yeah,
if
a
he
lot
did,
of
if Dave Grohl did write the guitar riff for "Senseless Apprentice," who knows what else he might have written, or maybe they would have just butt heads and broke up. Who knows?
yeah.
Yeah, no, I
Especially
mean,
especially that first Foo Fighters album was more in line with this than everything that followed afterwards. It was more because that first album was just him, so it was a little different in that aspect before it actually became like Foo Fighters. But
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, and there's a bunch of different quotes that you can find online where I mean it just gets you thinking. But like Pat Smear, he's got like a famous one where he's like, I didn't know where we were looking to go where we were looking to go at the time, but they went in the opposite direction of a Utero, not polished but not soft, and then it seemed like those first few albums, that's where they got all the noise out of their system. So who knows what the next album, their fourth studio album, could have been. And even Michael Stipe, he said they were Kurt was ready to come over. They're going to record together to get ready for the fourth Nirvana album. And it was mostly just going to be strings, more acoustic stuff. Maybe not as light as the Unplugged thing, but like in that direction. So he's got good people around him, and it's like just like the possibilities, like what could have been.
That's interesting. They got the noise out of them. Like they just wanted to get. Okay, can you just do that MTV Unplugged thing again? Just like, okay, fine. You got your Utero out of the way. You got your out of tune note solo. Cool, you got that done.
So
Let's
I
just
did see a quote.
let's get back to the polished thing so we can make another hit.
but
Yeah, just to add on to that, I did see a quote from Kurt back, or from like people that hung out with him at the when they were recording Bleach, and he was always more like into like classic rock. I mean, he did have punk in the 80s and stuff like that, but his influence were more like the Beatles and Queen, stuff like that. So when he made that album Bleach, apparently he leaned more into like the harder, more aggressive rock because that's what Sub Pop was releasing at the time. So going like seeing this album, this is more into his sensibilities of just being like straight up rock instead of like grunge or more of like a punk aesthetic.
Yeah, there's definitely not as much punk. I think Dave Grohl kind of changed that a bit because he's not really a punk drummer. There's not very much.
well, actually, Dave Grohl originally came from like a hardcore band from like Seattle,
Yeah, he's from Washington, D.C.
Washington. Yeah, so he's like pure punk. His
Oh,
background.
so he was playing punk. Okay, interesting. Because it's not. I don't like hear a lot of punk in the Foo Fighters either. So
Well, no, because he's a good drummer, so he's pretty versatile. So he can
yeah,
kind of
you can't just play punk then.
like Dave Grohl, when you hear his drumming on like the Nirvana stuff, then you hear his drumming on the early Foo Fighters and compare it to his work with Queens of the Stone Age and then like Crooked Vultures. It's all very different. It isn't like he's kind of one note and he's like drummed for like Nine Inch Nails and a whole slew of other people. And he's not. It's hard to pinpoint what he can do because he can do so much.
Yeah. Punk drumming is like generally pretty limited, so
Yeah.
he couldn't stay within those limits. I don't think he's too good.
Yeah, so I mean, since the through line for our like this episode and the next two is Dave Grohl, what do you like when you compare Bleach to like the next two albums? Is the drumming noticeably different?
Yes.
Yeah,
It's like it's like a no like this is coming from a non-drummer. There's a noticeable like upgrade in the quality of drumming. It almost like makes the songs like pop more and better. Whereas before, on Bleach, they sort of are just complementary. You know
yeah.
what I mean? They're just sort of there. But
Yeah,
yeah,
there
Ryan
was
will probably know more than me.
there was one of my friends in college. He was a huge fan of Dave Grohl's drumming. I went to school for drums, and so he one thing he pointed out was the kick drum pattern in "Smells Like Teen Spirit." And I remember him saying like, "Who would have thought of doing that? Who does that?" Because it's not like it sounds weirdly creative. It's not like a Tool creative. Oh, I'll go off into this crazy thing and you can't even decipher it. It's like a subtle creativity with Dave Grohl's drumming. It's not abrasive, but everything is like very creative. Like all the drum fills and all apologies, the time switching and milk it. It's not a show off kind of creative. It's not like how fast can I play like Jimmy Chamberlain kind of stuff. It's more it's musical. It's just like really musical. It serves the songs, you know.
Yeah, it seems like when he makes a decision, it isn't sort of like what can I do to show off here, or what can I do to like show my skill off here. It's more of like what can I do to make this song better? What can I do to add to this song, to add another layer, to be part of the songwriting? Like his drumming is, I don't know, like some of my, it's crazy to think like how many albums he played drums on that I love that aren't even, you know, that aren't even Nirvana. But I don't know, he brings like a different element. And there's a story, but I'll save it for the Queens of the Stone Age episode because it's about that album. But yeah, just seeing him in the studio is just interesting because there's some studio footage on the Songs for the Deaf CD came with like the enhanced video or whatever. And then also there's a couple of Foo Fighters documentaries where you see him in studio. It's just kind of interesting seeing how he works and how it's not always the same, and he's very adaptable and
and his drum parts are like hooky. Like the drum part in Sentence Apprentice is like it's kind of hard to play, but it's only subtly hard to play. But yeah, he's just the little hooks. Like one last thing, like the beginning of "Smell Like Teen Spirit." Just think about the drum part that he starts off with, which is like the flams. It's not like super complicated, but that build-up is so good. It serves the song. It makes it kick once it.
Or like I think what Brian's trying to say is like pretty much if Ryan got behind his drum kit right now and started playing one of the Nirvana songs drums, you'd probably know what song it was. Yeah. Like if you were to start playing "Smells Like Teen Spirit," like, oh, that smells like Teen Spirit. You start playing
In Bloom. In Bloom is like
you can jump over. You start playing Everlong. You know it's Everlong. You know what I mean? Like you would know it's Monkey Wrench. Like he has like the song, like that fits the song. It's like part of the songwriting. It isn't just keeping the beat. It's doing more than that.
You can tell that he's not just a drummer trying to show off. He's in service of the song, which is why he's writing songs, right? He's got his own album and stuff, right?
Yeah. So do you guys did Kurt Cobain, without Kurt Cobain, do you think Nirvana would have been as successful? Or do you think it was just more like as long as they got Kurt and a sick guitar riffs, they're good?
There's no Nirvana without.
You mean Dave Grohl?
Sorry, yeah, Dave Grohl.
Oh, okay.
I know.
Imagine that, Nirvana without Kurt.
Well, I think Kurt's talent and his mind and what he was bringing was so like undoubted at the time. Like, I don't know, it's hard to know because Nevermind was such like a microcosm. Like everything kind of came together with that release and where society was and where music was and what they were doing and what they changed in music. Because you have to realize like the biggest thing was if you listen to anything from like the 80s or prior, being in a rock band was like not easy. Like you had to be a good guitar player to be able to. This is kind of getting into like you could say this almost maybe root, but you're getting this again now with computers. Like simplifying like the guitar riff to what they were doing to like the power chords and stuff. It made it possible for anyone to just pick up a guitar and write a song.
Right.
Nirvana was like the first example of it, and he was someone who was like leaving his like soul in the music and everything and his playing and the presentation. He was very authentic, and people were drawn to that. So I think even without Dave Grohl, he would have still had that connection because what he was doing was kind of beyond the music in a sense, because he was kind of changing society. Because like you look at other bands, like you look at Soundgarden, who was around at the time, or Pearl Jam. Like I can't just sit here and learn a Soundgarden song in 5 minutes or a Pearl Jam song in 5 minutes, whereas I can sit here and learn 3 Nirvana songs in 5 minutes because 2 of them have the same chord progression. Like he made that possible. And like my connection to now is computers and people being able to make beats at home and stuff has opened that up for people where it's easier to make like a pop song or a hip hop song because now you can just program beats at home or an EDM song. He kind of did that with the guitar. Not that he invented the playing of the guitar, but he sort of was the first one who took these power chords and this simplistic way of songwriting that bands like the Pixies and stuff in the 80s kind of set the template for. And he kind of made an album that just sort of struck the right chord with society at the time. So I think you didn't need Dave Grohl for that.
No, but when I think about Nevermind, if it was what's the other guy, the drummer on
Chad Channing.
yeah, like if it was him, I feel like it just wouldn't have had quite the same punch. So it may not have been quite as successful. So I want to give him some of the credit.
Yeah. We also have to like Nevermind though is also like they got this new drummer who's like super talented and it's being produced by a drummer who's known for his drum sounds. So it was like a twofold for the drumming. Not the quality of drumming improved, plus the production of the drumming improved.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Yeah, no, that makes sense. Sorry. So
Chris Novoselic though, maybe you could have taken him early. I don't know. I'm joking.
They're high school buddies. They go back.
Well, the interesting thing about that was when Foo Fighters were beginning, because like at the time, like Pat Smear was in Nirvana, and like obviously Dave Grohl was in Nirvana, so they started Foo Fighters. Pat Smear went along. Chris Novoselic was also going to join the Foo Fighters as the bass player, but they didn't want it to seem like we're just replacing Kurt with Dave. So they didn't do that. It was interesting because like he went on to do some stuff, but really he's kind of a figure, I guess, in Seattle and stuff. But it would have been nice. It would have been kind of cool if he was actually, still making music and still around.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think I saw him at least 10 or 15 years after like the heyday in the 90s with Nirvana. And then it's like, yeah, he's bald. He's involved in local politics. Like,
yeah,
he's living off his royalties, I'm sure.
Yeah.
And then I do know, I think it's become more common, but like those guys will work on like Foo Fighter albums, and then they'll often do kind of like reunions, not reunions like often, but like for the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, or they'll do some songs with Paul McCartney, just like old Nirvana songs.
Oh yeah.
So it is becoming more common. I think it's maybe once they got outside the legal battles of like the 90s and the 2000s with Courtney Love, they're starting to open up a little bit more.
Because even like Pat Smear left Foo Fighters and then came back, and I believe like Chris Novoselic played bass on that one that they did the documentary that they recorded at.
Was it Sonic Highways? I can't
remember. The one they recorded in like Dave Grohl's garage. I believe he came in and played for that. And there's a story about how the three of them played "Smells Like Teen Spirit" and no one else was in the room or something.
Legendary.
It's like, yeah, there's hundreds of videos of them playing it on stage 30 years ago.
Probably sounded like shit because I hadn't practiced it.
I doubt it.
So we'll see where this answer goes. But the next question is this the band's peak? What do you think is Nirvana's peak? I can give my answer because I think it's probably the weird one, but we'll see.
Okay.
My answer is I think it's unfortunately, when Kurt Cobain committed suicide, because at that point he's now a rock god.
Legend.
There's nothing else that can come out after that will change their discography. It's like pretty much a perfect discography, and there's nothing that can change it, water it down, do anything. They're not going to go weird directions. Who knows? Maybe they just would have broke up and there would have been nothing else after. But there's always that unknown that'll be associated with Nirvana and Kurt Cobain, of course.
Yeah,
so unfortunately, I would say that's unfortunately the peak.
Yeah, I kind of have to agree with that, sadly, but I'd like to say it's when Nevermind came out, because after Nevermind, they sort of, that was a huge album. They could do whatever they want after. That's why they did In Utero the way it was, and they had their crazy live shows and their middle fingers to SNL when they told them not to play Rape Me and all this stuff that they were doing. But that kind of like solidified him as like a legend, I guess, at that point. As sad as it is that's what it takes nowadays to make someone a legend, is them to die. But
yeah,
but that's what it was. And like it probably made him bigger for it. Everyone kind of gets that pop after they die. There's a bigger jump in their sales or their streams now. And even for me, I'm pretty sure that's why I kind of got into them, was probably that wave of afterwards, which kind of led to the next wave of finding the next Kurt Cobain. So that kind of kept the music relevant by trying to find the next him. So you had bands like Bush and Silverchair and that whole echo of bands coming out, and which led to other things. But But
Yeah, it created a void for sure.
yeah. So, and when you look back, they're like the grandfathers, or like we're saying with My Bloody Valentine, there may have been grunge before Nevermind and some after Nevermind, but Nevermind was definitely the peak of that. But Nirvana kind of surpassed that. He's a rock god. He's not a grunge god.
Yeah, yeah, I would tend to agree with that, and agree that the death of Kurt Cobain solidified that legendary status, and it does change the way you listen to this album in particular because you know what's about to happen.
Yeah.
But actually, before you mentioned that, I was thinking that the Unplugged was maybe because it kind of felt like, you're right, Nevermind was the big blowout thing, but when the MTV Unplugged in New York thing it was like they were back almost, or they were in the limelight or in everybody's focus. And not only that, they were doing something that was appealing to the masses. It was almost like, even though Kurt Cobain likes that soft kind of stuff, it was almost like they finally were like, "All right, here you go. You can have some gentle music, some Polly."
Well, too, because also around that time, because like you had the release of In Utero, and then they had the big MTV Live and Loud, which was like a big thing. I remember even seeing videos from that on like Much Music.
Yeah.
And then they had and then like when they were on tour, I don't know if this is like before or after, he was like in and out of rehab, and then like the Unplugged happened, and he was like in and out of rehab after. Then he kind of died shortly after that. You know what I mean? Like it was all sort of so much like drama going on with that included the release of this album, and then later the release of it seemed like it started with the release of In Utero and then ended with the release of Live Through This, or whichever one, the whole album it was that came out like the day that he killed himself.
Oh yeah.
And I think he was involved in like the writing process.
Yeah.
And everything too.
Yeah, it just seemed like there was so much drama. They were, in magazines they were saying that Courtney Love was using while pregnant. There were unfit parents. They were going to take Frances Bean away. Like, I couldn't even imagine with today's news cycle and the way things are now, social media, how much that stuff would have been spun and how they would have been treated now. But the version back then was pretty toxic as well, and it kind of probably, led to some of the pressures and stuff that he's singing about on this album.
Yeah, it's weird. It's like the public elevated him, but he never wanted to be that guy at the front. He never wanted to be with the Chads. So, but we were like, "No, sorry, you're cool. we're gonna make you one of the popular kids." It's like, damn it. And then that tension eventually, I don't know really what led to the death of Kurt Cobain, but obviously there was some internal tension, turmoil going on.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, in today's age, the sad thing is he probably would have survived because everybody would have been a little more sensitive to drug abuse, depression, everything he was dealing with. Everybody would have been a little more open about that. He wouldn't have to deal with that quietly on his own or away from the media spotlight. The media spotlight maybe would embrace it. And then, yeah, unfortunately, he was tragically corrected. He put in his suicide note that Neil Young lyric where it's better to burn out than fade away. So I think he kind of knew what was going to happen or what he was going to do. Like, for example, when he was in rehab near the end, he got on a plane, he hopped the fence. It was in Los Angeles, hopped the fence, took a cab to the Los Angeles airport and flew back up to Seattle. And apparently one of the members of Guns N' Roses was on the plane and saw him, and he seemed like Kurt looked really happy, and like he had no idea like anything was amiss or anything like that. So yeah, I think Kurt knew what he wanted to do in that moment, and there was nothing that anybody could do to stop him.
It's unfortunate.
Yeah.
So I guess we've been kind of discussing this, the whole place in history thing. So I just thought I'd ask like a random question. What do you, in terms of all the rock bands out there, what do you guys think are like the top 5 all-time rock bands in terms of like sales, their impact, their generational impact? When you say like the 5 biggest rock bands of all time, like what are the first that come to mind? I would say like the Beatles, obviously. And then,
so does it have to be band or could it be like an artist?
I was thinking band, but we can expand it to artist because if it's artist, then yeah, you got to throw Michael Jackson in there.
Well, it's not rock though. Let's keep it rock.
Okay, we can keep it rock.
I would say like Little Richard would have to be on there. the dude invented rock music pretty much.
How far back in time again are we going? Are we going?
Like everything, just like whatever.
Okay.
The biggest of all time.
Well, I'd probably go Little Richard, Kirk, like Nirvana would be on there. Led Zeppelin would probably be on there.
Probably, yeah.
The Beatles
Beatles.
and
Beach Boys? You can
Would
leave
you-
the Beach Boys off? They're not rocky enough? Surf rock.
They kind of it sucks because they like the whole what was it the Brian like how many albums did they release? I know they have like a few like but did they like fall off? Like
some of that stuff in the like I don't know. They're one of those bands where they kind of ruined their legacy with some releases they had like in the 80s and stuff. How it was pretty watered down.
mhm.
But which goes to like Nirvana only having the 3 albums.
Right.
But yeah, I don't know who that 5th one. I don't know. Pink
Would you
Floyd
throw, like,
maybe.
Rolling Stones or Queen?
Yeah, there's Rolling Stones as well, and
I'd lean more towards like a Pink Floyd, or maybe even like a Stooges.
Yeah, they're pretty. They're only 3
top
albums, too,
five,
right?
top 5.
And I'm just trying to think who had like big impacts, because like Little Richard led to like Elvis and all that stuff in the 50s. Then you have like the 60s with the Beatles, the 70s with Zeppelin, but then you have like the 60s and 70s with Pink Floyd, and they kind of go into the 80s as well.
Mm-hmm.
Nirvana had the 90s.
Ozzy Osbourne. I mean, I'm not a fan, but I think
Yeah,
we're not
Black
being.
Sabbath, I think Black Sabbath.
This is too hard.
I don't listen to them too much, but like Guns N' Roses, they were in the 80s. They were gigantic.
Unfortunately.
And then like so after, is there anything after Nirvana? I was trying to think of this. I'm like, what's the biggest band? And like as a joke, I was going to say Coldplay, but like what's the biggest? Like it seems like Radiohead would be it, but like
Radiohead.
they're not like in like within rock they are, but like I'm thinking like when you think the biggest band, you think of like they're the mainstream at that moment.
Well, because with rock music nowadays, it doesn't really like exist, or it's like some sort of hybrid with electronic or with pop or with dance or with hip hop or something. Like you don't get like your pure rock acts anymore. And when you do, when you get a new rock act, it's usually pretty derivative of something older. There hasn't been like a really like unique newer act. I think you have a group band like Tame Impala, where I think he's making pretty unique music and different music, but it's doesn't really even fit into the rock mold half the time. I love a band like Queens of the Stone Age who still makes albums, but they're just a good band. I don't know if they're really, reinventing the wheel.
Mm-hmm.
I think that there's an opening right now for someone to come in, bring back some arm of rock music, because it hasn't been, rock music's kind of been ignored. And because you got so many subgenres of rock.
Yeah.
That's the other thing. Yeah, it's kind of broken up when like you got to think back in the day it was like the Beatles and it's like who else? Like it's the radio, they're dominating everything. So
like you look at the 2000s, you can have like your Coldplay was huge, but then Radiohead was huge. You have like the Strokes were coming in, the White Stripes were coming in. Like there's so much different stuff going on, but there isn't really like one king. Whereas back then you had your Nirvana and you had your Nirvana babies.
That's why I don't think there really is an opening anymore. I think the days of that are gone. The days of the giant band that everybody knows.
Well,
Except there is a few huge artists, but I don't know. They're not rock bands.
I think there's an opening because you get it in hip hop. Like you have your Drakes and your Travis Scotts, your Kendrick Lamars, and even in pop music you have your Taylor Swift or Beyonce. When they release stuff, it's like a lot of attention paid to it. But in rock music, I can't even think of a current rock band who can release an album to move the needle, which is kind of sad.
Is it bands themselves that have lost favor in the music? Because all those artists that you just mentioned, not one of them is a band.
Well, that's what I'm saying. It's like other genres of music are moving the needle, whereas rock, I can't think of a rock band that could drop an album and it'd be like trending online, debut #1, have the hottest song of the year. Rock hasn't moved like that in years. I can't remember a rock song having that big of an impact in like forever.
Yeah, it's like can Radiohead would do it, but like can they do it still? Like I mean, after their last 2 releases,
they're a legacy act. So those bands are still releasing albums. I mean, there hasn't been like a new exciting band releasing music.
Right.
Like there are newer bands that I like and I think are doing interesting stuff, but there's none that are like, moving the needle. They're not like one of the top 10 streamed albums. Like you need MGK release a rock album, and that's like one of the top rock albums. It's like, what, really? Like, you know what I mean? Like the most interesting thing in rock music was Post Malone doing his Nirvana tribute a year ago.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I know what you mean. Like in terms of like the way "Smells Like Teen Spirit" just cut through like hair metal, and you can see the distinct line where it's like, okay, after this song, everything's different.
Yeah, nobody wants to see you tap your guitar anymore.
I do sometimes.
Buckethead. Only if it's Buckethead.
So, did you guys have any final thoughts or anything to mention before we ask the question? Anything that we missed out on?
I think we already answered the question.
Yeah, that's true. My answer is I definitely think it's essential. I think, and to a lesser extent, so is the Unplugged. But I think it's just it shows all the lost potential, like what could have been, the direction they were going. It just opens up so many questions, and it's like, damn it, like why couldn't Kurt, I don't know, get help or see things, or people just back off and give him some space? Maybe if he was left alone for a while, he'd be better off.
I agree. I think like not only like the album and the band, I think it's like all essential. I think everyone needs to have like their Nirvana phase growing up. Kind of like us growing up. I don't know for you guys, but for me, I had some of those bands I was mentioning. I had my, Beatles phase. I had my Zeppelin phase, my David Bowie phase. I had my Nirvana phase. I had it a couple of times. And I think everyone needs to take a deep dive, listen to Nevermind, listen to In Utero, listen to Bleach, listen to the B-sides, watch some live videos. Like I think they were like important. I might be overkill, but I don't know. I feel like they're a band you need to have a phase. Like you need to have that 90s phase with maybe a week or two dedicated to Nirvana where we were listening to songs like D7 and verse, chorus, verse, and Moist Vagina, and I Hate Myself and I Want to Die. Like you should like listen to Nirvana. Like just give it a whirl. Like it's important. There's not many bands I would say that for, but Nirvana does seem like that important band.
Yeah. And given the amount of time that's passed from the initial release, I don't like, and all the rock music that you've probably heard or people have heard since then, they're not hard to listen to. It's not like a challenge to listen to Nirvana.
No.
Maybe this album though, In Utero, in some spots where it gets a little weird and atonal.
That's the thing, because like we do get like some weirder stuff and noisy stuff now, but some of the stuff on this album still is just as aggressive as as stuff coming out now.
So I think that this is the album where they dialed it in, how the sound that they were looking for, right? But it's hard to say that Nevermind's not the essential album, because that's really what really brought them to the forefront. But if you really want to understand like what Nirvana is as an art form, I think this is the album. This is really what the band was meant to be. And that's the part of the tragedy, because we don't know what was going to happen next. We didn't get to see.
Yeah. So that's all I got, guys. Unless there's anything else to add.
Well, that sounds pretty good.
Cool. Yeah. I guess that wraps up this episode of this week's episode of the Essential Albums podcast. Thanks for listening, and if you were watching on YouTube, feel free to comment whenever we're doing the live episodes. Like and subscribe. We appreciate that. We always like to hear the feedback.
Yep.
What are we doing next week?
We're going to do The Color and the Shape.
Right, by the Foo Fighters.
Second album. Yeah.
We're continuing. We're continuing our Dave Grohl. I don't know what we're calling it, but we're
marathon.
And we'll do Songs for the Deaf after.
Yeah, looking forward to that one. That one's really good album.
So
thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next week. Original music by Ryan Dugal and artwork by Vincent Tran. See you guys next week.
See y'all.